All right, let's talk about one of the creepiest figures in true crime history, Ed Gein. If you've ever wondered where horror movies get their inspiration, buckle up, because this guy is basically the blueprint for nightmares. Ed Gein grew up in the tiny, isolated town of Plainfield, Wisconsin. And to say his childhood was a mess is a massive understatement. His father was an alcoholic, but the true architect of Ed's warped reality was his mother, Augusta. She was a religious fanatic who preached that the world was a sinful place and that all women, besides herself, were vessels of the devil. To shield her two sons, Ed and Henry, from this perceived corruption, she moved the family to a secluded 160-acre farm, cutting them off from almost all human contact. After his father and then his brother died, Henry, under very mysterious circumstances during a brush fire, Ed was left completely alone with his domineering mother. When she finally died in 1945, Ed's entire world collapsed. He boarded up her room, preserving it as a shrine, and his descent into madness accelerated. Now, here's where things get really dark. After his mother's death, Gein's isolation festered. Then, in the 1950s, people in the Plainfield area started to vanish. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place on November 16, 1957, when hardware store owner Bernice Worden went missing. Her son, a deputy sheriff, found the store's cash register open and a blood trail leading out the back. The last receipt written that day was to Ed Gein for a gallon of antifreeze. When police went to Gein's farmhouse that night to question him, they were not ready for the house of horrors they were about to uncover. Chilling fact countdown. Let's start the countdown. Number 3, the human home decor. Investigators found chairs upholstered in human skin, lampshades crafted from faces, and window pulls made from human lips. He was literally living inside a tomb of his own making. Number 2, the grave robber. Gein confessed to at least 40 nocturnal visits to local cemeteries. He would dig up the graves of recently deceased, middle-aged women who he thought resembled his mother. His ultimate goal? To collect enough skin to create a woman's suit so he could crawl inside and, in his twisted mind, become his mother. And finally, number 1, the collection. The rest of the house was a museum of the macabre. They found bowls made from the tops of human skulls, a corset crafted from a female torso, leggings made of leg skin, a box of preserved female genitalia, and the decapitated head of Bernice Worden in a burlap sack. And yes, the infamous belt made of human nipples. I wish I was making this up. Ed Gein only confessed to killing 2 people, but his crimes were so uniquely grotesque, they became the blueprint for some of Hollywood's most iconic horror villains. Norman Bates' disturbing Oedipal attachment to his deceased mother in Psycho, that's pure Gein. Leatherface and his gruesome mask of human flesh in The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directly inspired by Gein's skin crafting. And Buffalo Bill, the serial killer in The Silence of the Lambs, who skins his victims to make a woman's suit. That's Gein's most twisted fantasy brought to the big screen. So, what happened to Ed? After his arrest, he was initially found mentally unfit to stand trial. His house of horrors mysteriously burned to the ground in 1958, likely by angry locals, before it could become a morbid tourist attraction. Gein was committed to the Central State Hospital for the criminally insane. A decade later, he was deemed sane enough for trial, convicted of 1 murder, but immediately returned to the mental hospital. He spent the rest of his life there, reportedly a quiet and polite patient, a chilling contrast to his crimes. He died of respiratory failure in 1984, and today he's buried back in Plainfield. His gravestone was repeatedly vandalized by souvenir hunters before being stolen in 2000. The recovered stone is now stored in a museum, far from the graves he once robbed. But amidst all the horror and Hollywood adaptations, it's crucial to remember the real people whose lives were stolen. The two women Ed Gein confessed to murdering were Bernice Worden and Mary Hogan. Bernice, a 58-year-old widow, ran the local hardware store. Her disappearance in 1957 is what finally led investigators to Gein's doorstep. Mary Hogan was the tough, well-liked owner of a local tavern who vanished 3 years earlier. For years, locals joked that she'd run off with a man, a dark piece of town folklore that hid a horrifying truth. These weren't just names on a case file. They were mothers, business owners, and vital parts of the Plainfield community. Their shocking deaths didn't just solve a mystery. They shattered the innocence of a small town, leaving a permanent scar that Hollywood adaptations can never truly capture. If you want more chilling stories, hit that follow. Stay safe out there.